But you've been using PickFu probably like 30 years now, right? And I really, since its inception, I just want to get your gut check on like why even use PickFu? There's a lot of tools out there, and I know you use other ones too, but
Yeah.
like what makes PickFu good?
So I'm ride or die PickFu since like day one. I think I've been using PickFu at least 6 or 7 years now. And for me, it came at a time when I was building my agency and I needed to put more data behind the decisions we were making. And I needed to do it in a way that wouldn't take so much time, right? And everything that was available at the time, there was no manager experiments. Everything was very manual, pulling this data in from your seller reports and trying to understand, like, does updating these images work? Like, yes, we see sales blips, yes, like, but how are we proving this out? And I needed some other way for us to pre-validate this stuff before we were going through a very risky situation of uploading it to the account. And that at the time could be very risky, you know? It still is risky for an established seller to be updating their content. So once I found PickFu for me, because it was so simple and because it was so fast and because it was so affordable, it was just the trifecta. It was a no-brainer. We have to use this with every single client. It is so easy. And since that day, we started using it. And actually, I loved it so much that I started putting out videos about PickFu, and I reached out to the team at PickFu saying like, hey, you need to hire me because I'm already doing these videos. I love this tool. We use it with all our clients. Like, we need to work together in some capacity, you know?
And that's the funny thing is, like, for me, since I came at PickFu and I'm putting out video content, I'm looking in the history of like YouTube and I'm like, there's a lot of videos with like Daniela thumbnails, like, and he uses a lot of content over there from you. And I was like, she really likes PickFu. This is so when you say fast, I don't think a lot of folks understand what fast is, right? Some people think fast is tomorrow. I'll get my results tomorrow, like compared to the old school traditional focus groups that are, on impractical jokers that they're always trying to trick people with their gadgets and stuff like that. So people think like those kind of old school, focus groups. What's fast really like in 2024 as a creative agency where it's like, okay, my team's working on this, they can't get from point A to point B without this data. Like, what's fast?
So for us, the longest test I think ever with PickFu would be maybe an hour to 2 hours max. The average is probably around 20 minutes. But if you look at it in comparison to what Amazon's giving us with manager experiments, we're talking about weeks. We're talking about 4 to 10 or 12 weeks for one single test. Yes, we want to do that at some point when the time is right to validate what we need to validate on Amazon specifically. But there's a whole step before that we need to focus on getting fast iterative data while we're designing so that we're not designing in a silo, so that we're not designing based on my or your personal opinion.
And then like I always ask people, because there's people that use PickFu. There's full service agencies, creative agencies like yourself, even PPC agencies, which is actually kind of cool because they're like, hey, I'm not going to bring you on as a PPC only client. I don't do creatives, but I want to make sure your creatives are good before we run your PPC, which is actually a really cool concept for PPC only agencies. But I'm curious, like, what does that look like for your team? So if you bring on a new client, right? A lot of folks will think like, oh, they're just testing one thing or two things, right? But there's a process for really testing and not just getting random data, because data that you're getting that's just random and it's non-actionable is worthless. Like, what are you going to do with data that's not actionable, right? So does it look like your team goes in there and tests, okay, current state of affairs versus competition, and then, okay, we understand that it's missing A, B, or C. Let's do a couple of different iterations of that and then test it and then validate. Like, what does that look like for your team?
So at a bare minimum, across every client account, we're doing main image split testing. Like, that's the bare minimum. but the way we do it might depend on the scenario of the client, right? There's some times where a main image is so bad that almost anything we do is going to make it better, and we know that.
Those are the best ones. Those are the gems where you get someone with a trash image and you're like, and you have to play it cool, like, yeah, we'll work on this. This is going to be hard, but it's a slam dunk. And then sometimes you look at them and you're like, do I even have to PickFu this? It's so bad, right?
Yeah.
But I get it.
So what we do is we're always coming up with at least 2 concepts, testing that against the base, the original, right? And so what we want to understand is the 2 concepts we come up with should be very different from one another. We're not trying to put out 2 things that are the same, but we're kind of saying, okay, what if we show it as this kind of bundle setup, or what if we show it as like this one is like this single product is super large and we have these other eye candy effects. Like we're coming up with 2 very distinct options versus the original. We know that one of those is going to beat the original, or both, and usually both do beat the original. Then the question is, which one is better of the 2 concepts? And so then it becomes, well, which one is better than the 2, which one of the 2 concepts is better in relation to the competition, right? Because then we want to understand which one is going to take more market share, from the search results page. And so that's a different test in itself. But at the bare minimum, everyone should run that first preliminary test to understand, did you come up with a concept that beats your baseline?